Why do so many spacewalkers come home with damaged hands? Their suits are engineering marvels, built to survive total vacuum, built to keep a fragile body alive, where absolutely nothing else can breathe. So why does the hand inside that suit come back broken, mission after mission? Is zero gravity really doing this to human skin? Or is something else entirely at work here, hour after hour, spacewalk after spacewalk? And why does it keep happening, no matter which glove design NASA sends up next? Astronauts lose their fingerprints in orbit. Sometimes they lose entire fingernails permanently, not because space itself attacks their skin in some mysterious way, because the glove built to keep their hands alive is also, quietly, crushing them. Picture the inside of that glove after an 8-hour spacewalk finally ends. One fingernail, fully detached, floating loose inside, trapped between two layers of fabric, inside the exact equipment meant to protect it. That image sits at the center of a real engineering mystery, not a rare freak accident either. This happens often enough that NASA tracks it as a known occupational hazard. Stick around, and by the end you'll understand exactly why it happens. Step outside a spacecraft, and the pressure around you is essentially zero. Nothing pushes back out there. No air molecules, no resistance, no cushion of any kind. Human blood and tissue fluid need outside pressure just to stay liquid. Strip that pressure away, and fluids inside exposed tissue would begin to boil. Think about what that actually means for a moment. Without that pressure, exposed tissue fluid doesn't just dry out. It boils even in the cold of space. Pressure keeps it liquid, temperature doesn't. So the glove carries one non-negotiable job, and it cannot fail at it. It has to hold roughly 4.3 psi around the entire hand. That's close to 200 millimeters of mercury, pressing on skin from every direction at once. To put that in perspective, that's roughly a third of normal air pressure, squeezed permanently around one hand, the palm and the knuckles and every fingertip, all under load. All of it sustained for the full length of the walk. Spacewalks typically run 6 to 8 hours from start to finish. The longest one ever recorded lasted 8 hours and 56 minutes straight. 2 astronauts, one glove design, one unbroken pressurized shell around each hand. Here's the detail almost nobody pictures correctly when they imagine a spacesuit glove. That glove isn't one thin layer of fabric at all. It's a stack, engineered in at least 4 distinct layers working together. A soft comfort liner sits closest to the skin for basic wearability. Around that liner, a gas-tight pressure bladder holds the actual breathable air in place. Outside the bladder, a fabric restraint layer stops it from ballooning outward under load, and the outermost shell adds insulation while guarding against micrometeoroid punctures. Engineers call that final outer shell the thermal micrometeoroid garment. 4 layers, stacked together and sealed shut around a living hand. Once that internal pressure locks in, something strange happens to the entire assembly. A glove that folded easily on Earth now behaves like a different object. Soft fabric turns rigid almost instantly, like a tube, wrapped tight around every single finger. There's a popular explanation for why this damages hands, and it almost sounds poetic. Zero gravity supposedly wears skin ridges away slowly, the way flowing water slowly erodes solid stone across centuries. It's a tidy, appealing image for a documentary narrator to use. It's also completely wrong. Gravity has nothing whatsoever to do with this injury. Floating has nothing to do with it either, despite how it sounds. The real cause is sustained mechanical pressure, nothing more mysterious than that, concentrated at one specific joint in the hand, produced by a glove simply doing the one job it was built for. No radiation exposure involved. No strange biology unique to orbit. Just physics, acting exactly the way physics always does. So let's follow the actual chain of cause and effect, one physical link at a time. To survive the vacuum outside, the glove inflates to roughly a third of an atmosphere. The instant that happens, the fabric stiffens almost completely. Think of a bicycle tire. The exact second air rushes in, floppy and soft one moment, rigid and unyielding the next. That new rigidity does something very specific to the hand inside it. It locks the knuckles solid, resisting almost any motion at all. Doctors call these particular joints the metacarpophalangeal joints, where each finger meets the palm. Bending a fully pressurized joint means fighting the glove's own internal air. Every single motion becomes a small battle against your own life support gear. Engineers actually have a name for this resistance. They call it glove work. It's measured and tested and minimized wherever possible. The knuckle resists stubbornly every time. So the astronaut adapts, almost without consciously noticing the shift. Faced with joints that refuse to bend freely anymore, astronauts change their grip strategy fast. They start gripping tools and handrails using sustained pressure at the fingertips instead. Why the fingertips specifically, and not the whole hand at once? Because the fingertip is the one part of the system still genuinely flexible enough to generate real, usable force against a rigid glove shell. The knuckle is locked solid. So the fingertip ends up absorbing the entire workload. The knuckle can no longer share. And the fingertip pays a steady price for that arrangement. Cycle after hour after hour. Inside every fingertip sits a rigid insert built directly into the glove's structure. Engineers simply call it a thimble, and it doesn't move. Every time an astronaut presses forward to grip something, the fingertip compresses against that thimble. Blood gets squeezed out of the nail bed underneath almost immediately. Then the grip finally releases, and blood rushes back in. Then the astronaut grips again, and it's squeezed out once more. Compressed, released, compressed again and again. Thousands of separate times, across a single 8-hour spacewalk. Not radiation causing any of this, not gravity either. Just blood, pushed out and back in, over soft tissue never built for that load. Multiply one grip by every tool change, every handrail transfer, every bolt turned that day. Do that thousands of times, and the tissue simply stops holding on eventually. There's no single dramatic moment where it fails, just a slow, cumulative erosion, hidden under the glove until the mission ends. That's the entire mechanism, laid out link by link. Now here's how researchers finally proved every part of it. The medical term for what happens next is onycholysis, a clinical word for something painful. That's the nail physically separating from the living bed beneath it. Sometimes it detaches completely, right there inside a sealed, pressurized glove. Mid-mission, hundreds of miles from the nearest hospital on Earth, NASA logs this condition in its own injury tracking system at Johnson Space Center. It's officially listed as one of the most common hand injuries tied to spacewalking work. Not rare, and certainly not exotic in any sense. A known recurring cost that comes with the job. Flight surgeons see it often enough to have a standard protocol ready. Astronauts are briefed on the risk before they ever suit up. For years, nobody could fully explain why some astronauts lost nails, and others never did. In 2010, MIT researcher Dava Newman led a study that finally dug into real numbers. Her team analyzed complete injury records for 232 individual astronauts, all of them logged inside NASA's own official tracking system over time. They cross-referenced those detailed injury records against precise hand measurements. 22 of those 232 astronauts had reported at least one case of nail delamination. Newman's team wanted one very specific answer from all that data, not a vague impression. An actual testable predictor of injury risk. What single factor actually predicted the injury out of everything they measured? The results surprised almost everyone involved in spacesuit engineering at the time. It overturned an idea the entire field had trusted for decades. And it did so with something rarely used before in spacesuit design: real statistical modeling, built directly from astronaut bodies. Before Newman's paper came out, the accepted explanation was refreshingly simple, almost intuitive if you'd never seen the actual data. Spacesuit designer Peter Homer, of Flagsuit LLC, summed up that older thinking plainly, years later. The theory held that astronauts with longer fingers simply hit the glove tip more often. More repeated contact during routine tasks meant more accumulated damage, or so everyone believed. It made clean sense on paper. It fit a simple mechanical story that anyone could picture instantly, without effort. For years, glove designers built around exactly that belief, sizing gloves mainly by finger length, and little else. It also turned out to be flatly, completely wrong. Newman's analysis found finger length had no significant statistical link to injury whatsoever, none at all, once the real numbers were properly run. The true predictor turned out to be something almost nobody had emphasized before her study: hand circumference measured at one location, specifically, the width around that same locked knuckle joint mentioned earlier. Astronauts with a hand circumference above roughly 9 inches showed something genuinely striking. That's the large to extra large range, using NASA's own internal sizing categories. Their reported injury rate came in at 19.6%, nearly 1 in 5. Astronauts with smaller hands showed just 5.6%. The cause was never finger length reaching repeatedly for the glove tip. It was knuckle joint compression, hiding in plain statistical sight. That finding didn't stand alone for very long either. A second, completely different kind of proof soon backed it up directly. NASA-funded research into mechanical counterpressure gloves took a far more direct experimental approach. Researchers including Tanaka and Waldy carried out that particular study, years apart from Newman's. Instead of studying old injury paperwork after the fact, they measured pressure directly, straight off living human hands, under genuinely realistic simulated load. This is evidence a courtroom would accept, not a guess dressed up as science. A glove design similar to current EVA suits compressed the middle finger noticeably. At the very top, pressure there reached roughly 184 millimeters of mercury. The back of the hand measured even higher still, well over 200. These aren't rough estimates pulled from old mission reports somewhere. They're hard physical numbers, measured with real sensors on real skin. They prove the crushing force at the joint is genuinely real. And they land exactly where the earlier injury data already pointed. Two entirely separate methods here, one built from injury statistics, one from sensors on skin, both converging on the same joint. Then a third, entirely independent angle arrived years later still, and it came from a genuinely different kind of question altogether. Between 2021 and 2022, a joint KBR and NASA modeling study ran fresh numbers. It was led by aerospace researcher Scott Norcross, working from Mission Archives. The team examined 31 separate documented onycholysis cases in total, spread across 22 individual astronauts, drawn straight from real mission records. Rather than simply counting injuries or measuring pressure in isolation, they built something new, a predictive risk formula, assembled from several distinct variables at once. It combined the physical gap between the fingertip and the glove tip, a gap of a few millimeters, multiplied across thousands of grips, into real tissue damage, plus the specific glove type involved in each case, plus the astronaut's sex and age factored in alongside everything else. Once again, glove geometry came out as the single dominant driver, not radiation, not gravity, not some vague, unexplained space effect. Hardware sitting plainly in the data, a risk formula built from geometry and design, not from anything resembling a mysterious space effect. To be fair, researchers don't claim every case is fully explained yet. Some astronauts with average hand size still develop nail damage anyway. Individual healing rates, skin thickness, and glove fit all likely play smaller supporting roles, but the dominant driver, across every dataset gathered so far, remains the same: sustained pressure at the knuckle, transferred down into repeated fingertip strain. And the measured gap between different hardware designs turned out to be enormous. Norcross's team found something remarkably specific among the gloves they directly compared. One particular glove design carried a full 8.5 times the risk of nail loss, compared against another design entirely, tested on that very same group of astronauts, 8.5 times the risk, just from switching the glove on the hand. That's not some unavoidable, built-in cost of human spaceflight at all. That's a measurable engineering variable sitting right there, hiding inside a piece of equipment everyone had long assumed was already optimized. Knowing this risk firsthand, some astronauts simply stopped waiting for engineers to fix it. Dava Newman has said publicly that she's heard of astronauts making a drastic personal choice, choosing deliberately to remove their own healthy fingernails beforehand, voluntarily at a doctor's office before a scheduled spacewalk. Why would anyone choose to do that to themselves on purpose, to avoid the sheer agony of delamination happening unexpectedly mid-mission, alone, hundreds of miles above Earth's surface, with hours of work still left? Sit with that particular choice for just a second, honestly. A nail tearing loose inside a glove is somehow worse than removing it in advance. That's not superstition. That's a rational trade, made by people who felt the alternative firsthand. Here's a way to actually feel this, instead of just hearing the numbers. Picture a thick winter mitten, pumped full of air like a balloon animal. Now try picking up a coin off a table, wearing that mitten, for hours straight. Every time you press a fingertip against that wall, you're squeezing your own nail bed, against something hard and completely unforgiving. Every time you release, blood floods back in, only to get squeezed out again. Do that thousands of times across one long shift. Eventually, the nail simply gives up and separates from the skin underneath. Nothing mysterious happened in space to cause that. A balloon mitten is a genuinely brutal tool to grip anything with for that many hours. Now pull every single thread of this entire story back together, because it all traces back to one single starting point. The glove absolutely must pressurize, or blood and fluid would boil away outside instantly. That same pressurization stiffens the fabric into something close to a rigid shell. The stiffness then locks the knuckle joint solid, forcing a fingertip-first grip instead. That fingertip gripping repeatedly compresses and then releases blood flow at the nail bed. And that exact cycle, repeated thousands of times, eventually tears the nail free entirely. One physical cause leading directly into the very next, link by link, without exception, all the way down to a single detached fingernail floating loose inside a sealed glove. Here's the strangest, quietest part of this entire chain of cause and effect. The exact choice that keeps a hand alive against vacuum is the choice damaging it, from within the glove itself, not from anything genuinely outside it. Protection and injury, delivered by one identical piece of engineered equipment, through one identical mechanism, every time. There was never a separate villain quietly hiding anywhere in this story. No malfunction. No design flaw hidden by a careless engineer somewhere. The glove was never truly fighting the very hand it holds and protects. It was only ever doing its one assigned job, precisely as engineered, a job that carries a real cost nobody understood for decades, hidden behind an explanation that felt right but wasn't. Not until researchers finally started measuring knuckles instead of measuring fingers. So picture that glove once more, one final time, sealed shut around a human hand, somewhere high above the Earth's surface. Inside it, one fingernail has finally, quietly let go of everything holding it, drifting loose between two layers of tightly stacked, pressurized fabric. Fabric engineered with extraordinary precision, specifically to keep that hand alive, not lost to the vacuum outside, and never touched by weightlessness at all. Sealed safely away by the equipment that caused the detachment.